Mara Ashwood arrived at the Black Iron Pack with mud on her boots and a name nobody recognized. The fortress was built from dark stone, the kind that held cold even in summer, and the gates stood 40 feet high like they were daring the sky to argue. She walked through them with her one bag over her shoulder and 17 pairs of eyes tracking her across the courtyard. She was not what anyone expected. No silver bloodline, no warrior ranking, no political family with land and treaties and carefully arranged daughters. Just Mara, 23 years old, with a scar along her left jaw that she never explained, and eyes that noticed everything quietly, the way people notice things when they have learned that being loud about noticing gets you hurt. The mating bond had chosen her. The Alpha King had not. Those were two very different things, and Mara understood both of them clearly before she had been inside the fortress for 1 hour. King Caelen ruled 6 territories and 3 mountain passes, and the uneasy loyalty of 12 subordinate packs. He was 31 and built like something that had survived every attempt to break it. His generals said he had never lost a battle. His people said he had never lost his temper either, which they considered more impressive. What they did not say, not out loud, was what everyone inside the fortress knew. He had a first Luna, 3 years ago. Her name was Sarah, and she had died in a winter that took 200 pack members with her, and Caelen had buried her in the East Garden under a cedar tree he had planted himself. And since then, he had not been a man who let things close to him. He was a king, still. He was capable and present, and he made decisions that kept his people alive and fed and protected. But he did it from behind a wall that had been built 1 stone at a time over 3 years, and nobody got through it. Not even his fated mate. Mara did not ask for his attention. She was not the kind of woman who asked for things she suspected she would not receive. She learned the fortress the way she had always learned new places, slowly and carefully, starting with the people who were not important enough for anyone to watch. The Omega women who managed the household, the cook who started work before dawn, the old healer, Betsy, who had a room full of dried plants and a sharp opinion about everything. These women saw her. They brought her tea without being asked. They showed her where the East Garden was, and Mara found the cedar tree and understood immediately what it meant, and she did not go back to that corner of the garden after that. She tended the herb section instead. She had grown up with her hands in soil. It was one of the few things that felt the same no matter where she was. She did not attend council dinners. She did not sit at the Luna's chair. She gave Caelen the distance he was very clearly asking for without ever quite asking, and she told herself this was practical, not painful. She was wrong about that, but she did not have time to examine it, because 4 months after she arrived, she began to feel different in the mornings. She counted the days twice. Then she sat in her room with both hands flat on the small round of her stomach, not yet visible to anyone but her, and she breathed. There was a baby coming. She was entirely alone, in a fortress full of people. She waited another 3 weeks, long enough to be certain, and then she went to the war room. She had never been inside the war room before. It was larger than she expected. Maps covered the main table, weighted at the corners with small iron stones. 3 generals stood around it. Caelen stood at the center, one hand resting on the edge of the table, reading something without looking up when she entered. His second, a broad man named Drev, looked at her first. She said it simply, before the room could find a way to route around her. "I am carrying your heir." The room went quiet, in the way rooms go quiet when something significant happens, and nobody is certain yet whether it is good or bad. Caelen looked up. For a moment, just a moment, something moved in his face. She saw it, a crack in the usual controlled steadiness of his expression, something that might have been, in a different man, in a different life, relief. Then Drev leaned forward and said something low about healer confirmation, about bloodline verification, about protocol. Caelen looked back at the maps. He said nothing to her. She left. Thought. She made it to the East Garden before the feeling caught up with her. She sat down on the low stone bench near the herb section, not the cedar corner, and she let herself understand what had just happened. This was not disappointment. Disappointment was what you felt when something you hoped for did not happen. This was something older and heavier. This was the feeling of a door you had not known you were hoping would open, being very gently, very finally, closed. She sat with it for a while. Then she went inside and ate lunch, and helped Betsy sort a new shipment of dried lavender, and she did not mention the war room to anyone. The pack noticed her belly before their king did. This was the particular cruelty of the following months, slow and quiet, and not dramatic enough for anyone to name. The Omega women began bringing her food she had not asked for. General Ross's mate, a healer herself, began teaching Mara the pack's specific healing traditions, knowledge that was by every tradition and rite supposed to come from Caelen. It did not come from him. The tradition simply moved around him, the way water moves around something immovable. Caelen was not absent. She would have known how to manage absence. He was present in every room and yet consistently, carefully, not there for her. Someone arranged for her quarters to be warmer. Someone ensured she had everything she needed. He sat her at the Luna's chair at council meals, which he was required to do. He did not look at her for longer than courtesy demanded. He was afraid. She understood this slowly, the way you understand something you do not want to understand. He was the most powerful man in 6 territories, and he was terrified of her, not of her specifically, but of what she was, the thing the bond was asking him to let matter, and what it had cost him the last time he let something matter. She almost found it tender. She was also very tired. The baby came early, on a night in late autumn when rain came sideways against the fortress walls, and the Omega women were summoned, one by one, to the birthing room, until there were 3 of them, and Betsy, and a fire burning high in the corner. It was difficult. Mara did not remember all of it. She remembered the rain. She remembered Betsy's voice saying steady, 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 like a rope she could hold on to. She remembered the moment the room changed, a different kind of sound, small and furious and perfect, and something inside her that had been braced for a long time finally let go. She held her daughter, dark hair, loud, absolutely certain of her own importance from the first moment. Mara named her Ren. It had been her mother's name, from a life before, from a woman who had not lived long enough to see this, but who had taught Mara almost everything she knew about surviving the things you do not expect. Someone told Caelen. He came to the doorway of the birthing room while the fire was still burning high. Mara saw him from the bed, and she was too tired to pretend, so she simply watched him. He looked at Ren. His face did something complicated that she had no energy left to interpret. He left. Betsy, sitting beside the bed, said nothing. She simply reached over and adjusted the blanket around Ren's small shoulders, and the tenderness of the gesture made Mara's eyes burn in a way the labor itself had not. She held Ren tighter. She stared at the ceiling. She thought for a long time. Then she made a decision. Prick. She wrote the letter in the morning, when the room was quiet and Ren was sleeping, and she had slept 3 hours and felt more clear-headed than she had in months. She did not write it in anger. Anger would have been easier. Anger had edges, something to push against. She wrote it in the same voice she had used her whole life for things that needed to be said plainly. She told him she had loved him, past tense, deliberate, honest. She told him Ren would grow up knowing her mother's name, and her mother's people, and her mother's stories, and she would know her father's name too, and learn who he was only when she was old enough to ask, and only if Mara believed the answer would not hurt her. She told him the bond was real. She told him she was no longer willing to outlast it by pretending it was not there. She told him that was the only unkindness she was laying at his door, the only accusation in the whole letter, that he had asked her without ever quite asking to pretend she was not real, and she had done it for 7 months, and she was not going to do it anymore. She wished him well. She meant it. She placed the letter on top of his maps in the war room, so it could not be avoided, and she walked down the corridor and out through the main gate, with Ren wrapped against her chest, and her one bag on her shoulder, and the road going west in front of her. The road was harder than she expected, because she was still healing and the morning was cold, but she kept walking. She had been walking for 3 hours when she heard the horse. She turned. Caelen was alone, no generals, no guard. He had ridden hard. His horse was breathing roughly, and his hair was wet from the morning mist. And he looked like a man who had made a decision in a hurry, and not stopped to consider what he would say when he got there. He stopped several feet away. He got off the horse. He went to his knees. This was not a posture she had ever associated with him. He was a man who had never been on his knees in her entire understanding of him. He looked strange there, like a very large piece of furniture suddenly placed in the wrong room. He said, "Don't," just the one word. And then, clearly, he had no idea what came next. Mara watched him. She did not help him. She had spent 7 months making things easier for him, and she was finished with that specific work. She held Ren against her chest, and she waited. He found the words. It took a while. They were not polished or arranged well, nothing like the way he spoke in council rooms. He said Sarah's name, which was the first time he had said it out loud in 3 years, and his voice did something rough on the middle syllable. He said he had been afraid, not in those exact words, because he was not a man who said, "I am afraid" easily, but in words that meant the same thing, that he had buried something alongside Sarah, and he had built the fortress up around it, and when Mara arrived and the bond pulled at him, he had treated her like a threat, because that was the only way he knew to keep from losing another thing. He said he had watched his pack care for her. He had watched the Omega women bring her food, and Betsy teach her, and General Ross's mate treat her like she already belonged. He had watched all of this, and done nothing, and told himself it was better that way, and the letter had told him what he had actually done instead. He reached out and touched Ren's dark hair. His hand was not steady. Mara looked at his hand on her daughter's hair, and she thought about 7 months of mornings alone, and the cedar tree in the east garden, and the way the bond had pulled at her like a tide she was not allowed to go toward. She thought about the letter and whether she had meant it. She had meant it. She still meant it. She asked him one question. What is her name? He understood what she was asking. She was not asking if he had read the letter. She was asking if he had received it, all of it, not just the words on the paper, but the thing underneath them. She was asking if he could say the name of his own child out loud, to her face, in real air. He said, without hesitating, "Ren." Something in her chest that had been held very tight for a very long time loosened slightly. She did not tell him everything was fine. It was not fine, not yet. And she was not a woman who said things that were not true to make a moment easier. She told him there was a great deal of ground between here and fine, and she needed him to cover it in real ways, with his voice, with his presence, with his actual self, not through carefully arranged protocol and considerate silence. He nodded. He did not argue, which told her something. She turned back to the road. She began walking east. He walked beside her. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The fortress was 3 hours away, and the morning mist was lifting, and Ren slept against Mara's chest with the total confidence of someone who had never yet had reason to doubt that she was held. Caelen kept glancing at her, small, careful glances, the kind you give something you are not yet certain you are allowed to look at directly. After a while, he reached over and adjusted the edge of the wrap around Ren's shoulder, where it had slipped. He did it without being asked, without being noticed, without looking at Mara to see if she had seen. She had seen. She did not say anything. She kept walking. But she moved an inch closer on the road, and he matched it without comment, and the three of them walked east together through the clearing morning, with the fortress growing slowly larger on the horizon. Ren grew up knowing her own name, and her mother's name, and her father's face in the doorway every morning before council, not because anyone required it, but because he was there. That was how it started. That was enough.